everyone. Thanks you so much for joining me today. And if you've been waiting for us for a few minutes, we apologize. There was some internet connectivity issues. You know, the great thing about the internet is when it works, it's beautiful because I'm able to connect you and myself to people who are in other states and even other parts of the world. So this is hashtag no limits. Hashtag no limits is about people who society places limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, we know who we are, but not who we will become. And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. For anyone who doesn't know, the caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells and then it reforms into the butterfly. As if that's not struggle enough, it then has to fight its way out of the cocoon in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly everywhere that it will need to go. And it has the support of the cocoon. And so today, my guest is someone who supports those who are busting through those limits, like the butterfly. Today, I have with me Jenny Keese, and she is from Texas. Jenny, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that this worked out. For those who don't know, Jenny and I have had several miscommunications and several attempts at this, and it has not worked out. And honestly, I think it's my fault because I think I did find the thread where I had told you that you would be on last week. And so she called me last week. She's like, hey, are you ready for today? And I'm like, no. So thank you for being understanding, and thank you for being here today. So Jenny, tell us a little bit about yourself and like what it is that is the reason you're with me today.
Okay. I am a mom of 3. I have 2 boys and a little baby daughter. My oldest son is also on the spectrum. I founded Concept Connections, an ABA clinic. We have 3 clinics across DFW. And I also founded Winrose Academy, which is special education nonprofit school in Plano, Texas. And so, yeah, I work a lot, I mom a lot, and yeah, that's what I do.
You're just all busy all the time, 24/7, 365.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So the reason that we were brought together is, I believe a mutual friend of ours connected us. And I think the original thought was because of the Concept Connections, because I didn't know about this special education school that you have. So we definitely want to talk about that as we go throughout our conversation today. But so yeah, first of all, tell us a little bit more about Concept Connections. And while you're doing that, I can pull up your website. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to do that while you're talking about it.
Okay. Well, let me see. Come November of this year, it will be our 10-year anniversary of operating, which is pretty cool. I founded it 10 years ago, thinking that I'm a BCBA, thinking that I would have in-home ABA clients, a handful, and just raise my son and be, absolutely happy with that. Concept Connections very organically grew incredibly fast. Truthfully faster than I could keep up with it. And 10 years later, we have 3 clinics and in-homes all over the place. It's been quite the ride, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
Learning curve.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what ABA is, would you mind explaining that?
Yeah, ABA is Applied Behavioral Analysis. And broken down terms, it's basically the science of human behavior or behavior applied to human socially significant settings. And there's many different subsets of ABA, and every practitioner practices a little bit different. And so you can, in the spectrum of ABA, you can have very discrete trial all the way to very, very naturalistic, borderlining kind of talk therapy, role playing, things of that nature. And so most of the time, the intervention techniques are prescribed based on each individual learner, and we try to identify what motivates the person, what's important to the person, how they learn best, and like what their sensory system needs. And so, it's, to me, you're just building a very close relationship with another human being, knowing their ins and outs, knowing what makes them uncomfortable, what makes them happy, and going with that.
Yeah, that's a very good way of describing it. What's like a typical session like? Is that even possible to say, a typical session?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, it depends on the practice. So, for instance, like I said, that most ABA practitioners have like little differences in the way that they practice. Mm-hmm. Some prefer to only see little kids. Some prefer to only see big kids. Some prefer not to see adults. And so it really depends on the practitioner. I think that for us, a typical session is what that particular child or adult needs. For instance, in the practice, we have very little bitties, like 2-year-olds. And so for them, their day looks very preschoolish. We have groups, social groups, working on basic communication, things of this nature, all the way to, I just took on a client who's 22 years old, incredibly verbal, and wants to work on her own self-stimulatory behavior, finding replacements and things that are a little bit more conspicuous. She's embarrassed by some of her stems. And so working on things of that nature. So really, at least in my practice, we have a very broad scope of who we serve. And so it just depends. It can be an 8-hour full day at the center, all the way to 2 hours at your house or in Kroger, or I've gone on dates with some of my clients. It just depends what they need.
That's so incredible and so impressive. I was trying to put impressive and incredible together, and my mouth was not wanting to listen. But that's amazing, because typically my experience with ABA has only been in a classroom in a school setting. Okay. I know that it can happen at a clinic and yep. within the homes, but to hear that, you've gone to Kroger, or you've gone to, which for anybody who doesn't know what Kroger is, that's a grocery store.
Thing, sorry.
No, that's okay. Because where I'm at in Southern Illinois, we used to have them, and they've kind of gone to the wayside. So, but I thought, maybe somebody else in another part of the country may not know what it is. And so to go on a date with someone, I'd like to touch back on, you said some of the stimming. And I think, a lot of my audience probably does know what stimming is, but for those who may not, would you mind explaining that too?
Sure. Stimming is self-stimulatory behavior. So in ABA speak, we would say that it's behavior that occurs on its own automatically, that the person intrinsically likes this, and therefore they do it. I think in special education language or counseling language, it would be described as like a coping or self-soothing behavior, since we know a lot of people on the spectrum can really struggle with being overwhelmed by their sensory world. And so they perhaps develop these behaviors to help them cope with it. My son in particular, he will jump and flap when he is really, really happy. And so now that he's really verbal, he hides it. He won't do it at school, but he'll come home, and the first thing he's doing is we call it his happy dance. And he tells me it like gets the energy out, almost like it's been bottling up all day because he's trying to mask so hard at school. And then he comes home, in 15 hard minutes, he is going to town and he's good. So, wow. I think different paradigms and subsets of ABA view that differently too.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that a little bit more, if that's okay with you, because so there's a couple of things that you said in there that I wanted to discuss. That it's kind of a natural thing and whether or not we as a school setting or as a society, if, if we need to try to stop that. And then secondly, the fact that you said he masks throughout his school day. And so if you could talk a little bit more about that. And the reason that I want to talk about both of those is because I'm a special education teacher by nature, and I do have teachers and parents who watch this. And so to try to help them have a different perspective or maybe a better understanding of those two ideas, I think that would be really great if you could talk about those things.
Sure. And I just want to lead with that. That's a very hot button issue. People have very strong opinions one way or the other. And, don't come at me, guys. Just trying to help. But typically for me, myself, I don't have many at all, large generalized opinions on most things. I will just look at the person in front of me and analyze them and go with what I'm seeing for them. And so, for instance, with self-stimulatory behavior, I don't want to say you should never intervene on it and you should never stop it, because there's self-stimulatory behavior that is incredibly harmful to the person. I have seen some of the saddest things ever, biting themselves to bleeding, scratching so hard they're digging holes in their arms. I watched a guy blind himself in one eye from punching. And so what BCBAs do, and some school personnel does, is we'll do a functional behavior assessment on any behavior. And so whatever behavior is causing the most harm or interrupting learning, or just interrupting the functioning level, we're going to do an FBA on that behavior. And so based on the FBA is how we know how to intervene. So for instance, if I have a guy, I have many teenage and adult clients, so I'm probably going to refer to men a lot, is let's say he's biting himself and to blood, he's calloused up his hand right here, and the function comes back automatic positive, which is a self-stimulatory behavior. I'm going to talk to that mother or that guardian really, really tough about, I feel like this is really harming him as a person. Will you give me consent to intervene on that behavior? And intervention can look totally different, but that's one that I would say, if that's a coping skill, it's causing him more harm than good. Let's try to find him an alternative coping skill, even if it's another stem, just a stem that doesn't hurt him.
Right.
All the way to, for instance, a little bitty, maybe a 2-year-old that, let me think of a behavior, constant verbalizations or scripting. I would do an FBA, and if the function came back as automatic positive, which is self-stimulatory behavior, I would talk to the parents about, here are the pros and cons. He is scripting or repeating shows, and let's assume this child is moderately verbal, scripting, repeating shows and songs, which is great that he's using his language, especially at that age. That's fantastic. However, at this point, it's happening so much that it's actually getting in the way of him learning more functional language and participating on a functional level. So here are some things we can do to reduce that scripting and replace it with appropriate behavior, like asking to sing a song before singing a song, if it's in the middle of something, or a conversation, or even giving him some time. Often, especially if it's a coping mechanism, I will tie the self-stimulatory behavior to something. So when the child sees this picture on their schedule or whatever, then they get to do whatever their favorite stem is for 10 minutes. And then we got to stop that so we can move on, so we can focus on, our learning objectives for the day. So there are a lot of different ways to intervene on it. But my general statement is that if it's harming them, it's got to go. And if it's helping them, it needs to stay and or be morphed and changed into something similar that is less disruptive or less interruptive. You just don't want to take away someone's coping skills without giving them more. You're just going to breed a very anxious, irritable, unhappy human being doing that.
Yeah, and that's so awesome what you said, everything that you said. But one of the things that I really appreciated, because I think I am very similar, is that I very much look at the person in front of me and try very hard not to make those big, broad, sweeping generalizations that you talked about. Because I do get people who ask me a lot of different questions, and they tend not to like my answers, because I will say, well, it depends on the individual. It depends on the situation. And, they're coming to me because they want me to give them this answer, and it's going to work every time for every situation for everybody. And I just don't believe that exists.
And I get the soapbox thing. I have several of my own, probably that I won't share, but most of the time you look at the person and you go from there. And, the more heinous things like punishment or really horrible punishment that causes harm, no, those should never be used, especially in behavior analysis. We have such a breadth of technology, and we BCBAs tend to be really nerdy, smart people. We can almost always find a way around having to use like a very crude punishment system. So that's really my only soapbox, is the easiest way is not always the best way. Try. You can almost always accomplish your therapeutic goals in a humane and kind manner. You might have to put a little more brain power behind it, but it's very possible. So that's my only soapbox.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It does take some out-of-the-box thinking. It does take some creativity, because we do get very set in doing things a certain way, because, as you mentioned, it's the easiest way to do it, because either literally it's very easy to do, or it's what we're accustomed to and what we're used to. And so that's our just automatic go-to. But it isn't going to work in every situation. And along the lines of what you were saying, I think that a lot of people have the idea that kids will behave if they want to. And so therefore we need to punish them so that they won't want the punishment and they'll want to behave.
Yeah.
But that is not the science behind behavior.
No, that's a lot of inferring feelings. And I think one thing that has come to light in the last couple years in society in general is just trauma-informed care. And that started to hit my field too, which I think is excellent. So if you're going with that approach, then whoever is seeing this child could be like projecting their own issues on the child, and making clinical calls based on how the adult is feeling. That is very bad. That kid is probably not going to get the best care that they need.
Right.
Yeah, and that can be tough. And especially going back to the realm of punishment, we know that punishment can be very reinforcing to the punisher. The adult doing that typically gets very quick results. It makes them feel powerful and like they did it, they changed it. But at what cost is what I would challenge them to think. And so,
right. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So I did want to just give a quick shout out. So we do have Fran joining us from Southern Illinois. Hi, Fran.
Hi.
And then we have Lisa, who says, love how Jenny Juno Keese has taught me how to implement the ABA process within the classroom. I continue to learn from her.
I appreciate that. And boy, let me tell you, Lisa, she's our director at Winrose. She was not an automatic on my team. It took about 2 years working with her, because she's been a special ed teacher and a fantastic one forever, 20 plus years. And so then trying to switch some of her mindset to some more ABA interventions was interesting. She was like, no, this is how you do it. And I'm like, well, for this kid right now, under these circumstances, let's try it like this. But after about 2 years of wearing her down. Yeah.
And she's appreciative based on that comment. Yeah. And
awesome.
I do want to go back to the masking, because we haven't talked about that with regards to your son, but not only your son. I mean, this happens with a lot of kids with a lot of behaviors, and not just those on the autism spectrum. I mean, this happens in so many cases. So talk a little bit about what you meant when you said masking, and then what your thoughts are about masking, and if the school could possibly do something else during the school day to support the child, or if it's okay that they mask and they wait until they get home.
I do want to say that this is where it gets a little gray for me, because on one hand, I'm Nathan's mom. And on the other hand, I'm a BCBA SPED teacher, autism specialist. And so when talking about my son, that's not necessarily what I would recommend for other people. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think when I or any professional is working with a parent, we need to be looking through their lens of social validity. And so if it's not important to a parent, then, we really need to think, is that something we need to do? For instance, I have a parent that I'm pretty sure is watching this right now that is teaching me a lot of stuff, because she's very, what's the word?
Might it be this person?
Yeah. Hi.
She just commented. Yep.
Hi. I won't out you all the way, but I'll talk around it. That she really challenges me to think differently. Because what's important to her and her family is not the standard stuff. And so I'm thinking the child is really young and incredibly bright. And so I'm thinking, okay, group instruction, sit with the social group, blah, 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 the typical kind of preschool, early elementary school stuff. And the mom's like, yeah, no, nope, don't want it. Don't do it. And so
she says it's all good.
Mm-hmm. And so it challenges me, because, there are critical milestone skills, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if his path is going to be different, and it seems like the family is very into his path being different, then I should work on the level of his path being different. I should get on their path and not try to drag them onto my path. Does that make sense? For instance, in the STEM stuff area, typically with little guys, I would say, let's work on sitting in a chair. Let's work on sitting and attending without self-stimulatory behavior. And that's not something that the family gives me consent for. They are good with him standing to work. They are good with him stimming to pay attention. And in fact, sometimes it can help him pay better attention. And so it's those type of shifts that I really have to think through their eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then for my own child, I get to put my own, I'm the mama. So my value system is driving that. And so that is different than how I practice. So, when I talk about my son, I don't want anyone to think these are choices I would present to any parent, because some of my choices are a little odd too. And socially, that's just what was significant to us.
Yeah, no, and that makes complete sense, because as you said, not only is the child an individual, but every family is an individual entity. And so looking at it from that perspective makes complete sense to me. And I want to give you kudos for recognizing that and shifting in your own thinking, in your own perspective, because, I found myself thinking, well, this is the way to do it, because this works, and, not doing what that other family member or that other entity wants. And as you said, it's about how they want to live their lives. And, sometimes I think we do get caught up in but society says, or, society wants.
Exactly.
And yes, are there some things that are more acceptable out in society, maybe, and maybe that's a good thing, but there's a lot of things that society can change their way of thinking too.
Exactly. And with my son, I chose to use the term masking because as he got older, he could understand much more than he could when he was 2. Mm-hmm. And so I just picked it because it was kind of a buzzword at the time, and it made social sense for me to say that versus Nathan, use your functional replacement behaviors. I don't want to talk to him that way.
Right.
So in essence, I taught him functional replacement behaviors and taught him coping skills that were a little bit more socially significant, not socially, a little bit more appropriate, a little bit hideable, because he was, as soon as he became aware, he did start getting really embarrassed of some of the stuff that he needed to do to be okay. That was his words. Mm-hmm. And so in his older years, that's what I've really focused on. But he was never punished. We've been blessed to have great therapists and teachers. But as a family, we do use the word masking. And for my son, I do think my choice is that I think it was appropriate for him to learn how to go with the flow. He's able to stay and be successful in grade level academics. He's able to be in a moderately large group and, learn new instruction. And so I thought, okay, he could do general education. That's cool. What are the things that are holding him back from that? And his happy dance is one of them. It also became socially stigmatizing as he got older. His need to escape. He's a very anxious boy. And so he has all his teachers have his IEP, but he also has a very small card that says take a break. And so all he has to do is slip that to whatever teacher is there, and he's allowed to go to the sped room, like unlimited times a day to calm down and get some sensory input. But man, that took years of teaching him to identify his own thoughts and feelings was something I did not know that he was going to attain or not. So this past year he did, and that was really exciting. And that was a big corner changer for him. So yeah, to do these sophisticated self-monitoring things, you really have to be working on it for multiple years. Does that make sense? So with Nathan or any child, I always look at what is the fundamental roadblock for this kiddo? What is the thing? There can be multiple, but there's usually one that is the worst thing that is holding this kid back. I want to start working on that at 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And so that by the time we get to 10 years old, we can be doing these sophisticated, self-monitoring systems. I hope one day that I'm able to teach Nathan and my other clients how to monitor their own thoughts. A lot of them, especially my son, can have very racing, repeating thoughts. I would love for him to be at a place where he could track it and be like, I had 20, thoughts that I need to run out the door in 15 minutes. But yesterday I had 100. I'm doing better. We're not there yet, but I'm going to keep working that direction. And as far as on the client level, masking or teaching children to mask or using that word, I would go with the guidance of the parent. I would, tell them their options that were appropriate for that child in that setting. And I would let them tell me what their preferences were. And likely that's what I would go with.
Yeah. And I'm so appreciative of the fact that you said it's not a quick fix. Because I think a lot of school districts and school personnel and maybe even parents think, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to, take my kid to this therapist and they're going to get ABA or they're going to get whatever help. It doesn't even have to be ABA. And it's just, they're going to learn this in just a few months or maybe a year. And if we're still at this, 2-3 years later, people are saying, well, it's not working. but it's a process. And I mean, you're like literally reforming things in the brain, and making different connections and solidifying those connections. And that isn't a quick fix. It just takes time. So we do have a comment here from Jessica, and she says, if you have tips for helping a parent on how to show the school to see the need and importance of ABA or BCBA guidance within the classroom.
I'm not sure what state she's asking from.
Wisconsin.
I'm not familiar with Wisconsin law at all. I know in Texas, there is a big aversion to having RBTs in the classroom. BCBAs, there has been historically, but now it seems like in my area, it's becoming more desired. I don't know how your funding works in Wisconsin, so let me talk through Texas law, and if it's applicable, let me know. If not, drop another comment and I'll try to navigate to you. But here it's all about funding. Having to pay BCBAs, this is a complicated job, and we can't have caseloads of 120 kids or no one's going to get the appropriate supervision that they need. And so that's what we find here is that A, schools don't want to pay for it. B, good luck finding enough BCBAs for any school, let alone school district. I mean, I live in a very saturated area, saturated with BCBAs and RBTs and clinics, and there's still not enough. It just takes a lot. And so if I were you, I would always come and let the data lead. So for instance, your child, if there is aggression or self-injury, elopement, any behavior that is dangerous or interrupting their learning, like constant vocalizations, constant out-of-seat behavior, I would request them formally in we call it ARD. I don't know what your IEP meeting is called, but request that they take data on it every single day and send it home to you. And then you can come back to an ARD and say, look, my child has 400 times in a day out-of-seat behavior. Tell me that they're learning. How is he accomplishing his goals? And then you can kind of use that to, for lack of better words, back them into a corner of accomplishing the goals. So once a goal is written and agreed upon, they are locked into that goal. So if they are unable to accomplish it because of the child's behavior or lack of resources or whatever, they have to then provide it. So try to maybe go that way. Get goals accepted that will force them to work on the behaviors that you want. Does that help?
I don't know if it helps her. Okay. But I wonder sometimes, because again, my experience was the ABA in the classrooms. And sometimes I think we've gone too far the other way as far as inclusion is concerned. When I first started teaching, there was some inclusion. And then there was the big push for full inclusion, stay in the general ed room. And now people that want their child out of the gen ed room because they don't feel like they're learning enough or that they're getting their sensory needs met or whatever it is, have a hard time getting the student out of that gen ed space. And even with behaviors, I've heard of districts, like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. We're not going to worry about it. And it's that, it's that elopement. It's the, pulling on the other kids, pulling on their hair, pulling on their clothing. It's talking. It's up and down out of their seats. I mean, it's all these kinds of things. And it's like, I don't know. And I don't want to say that it can't be done in the gen ed room because it possibly could be. Again, it's an individual situation, but do you see that happening in Texas as well?
Yes.
And Jessica says, yes, thanks. That helped.
Good. Yes, definitely. And, I think accepting people is awesome. I feel like that's much of what society fights for this thing or that thing, is just accept me as I am and don't force your ideology on me. I love that. And I love inclusion. I think it's incredibly important. But I do think that everyone, not just school districts, really just want the answer. Like, what's going to fix this? Or where do I put this child? And so we make up these broad rules or broad laws or broad procedures that sound really, really good, but then in practice may not be the best for everyone. And so, again, just going back to child first mentality, in an ARD meeting or an IEP meeting, we should be looking at every single child, regardless of the system in place of the school, and say, what would be the best for this child? There's a lot of elopement. There's a lot of out of seat behavior. So maybe we should start this child in their pull-out time, their inclusion time in recess and PE. And then for circle time, we'll assign a shadow or an aide to go in for circle time, directly work on the goals of out-of-seat behavior and elopement for that 20 minutes, and then we're out. That way the child is not practicing inappropriate behavior. I think, like I said, inclusion is great, but one super downfall to it is that it's put a lot of children in the position to practice their maladaptive behavior instead of working on their maladaptive behavior. Going into an environment that doesn't have the intervention in place that the child needs to progress is not helping the child. It's great to give them exposure to kids. They may be picking up on stuff in the class. That's wonderful. But again, instead of having the broad rule and just looking at the child in particular and talking to the parents, what's socially significant to them, and then developing a plan for that kid. I don't know how it is in Wisconsin, but I definitely don't think that is the large majority of Texas. There definitely are schools that are better than others, and classrooms that are better than others, and teachers that are more with it than others. And so I don't think there's a broad rule that fixes that.
Yeah. And what I do as because I'm no longer teaching full time, as a special education consultant and IEP coach, is reminding people. And I had to stifle a chuckle when you were saying it's not about the program that the school has or the curriculum that the school is using. I'm in a battle right now with a particular place. We're like, well, this is the program that we use, and we write the IEPs to fit the program. I'm like, no, that's not how we write IEPs. There's that first letter, that letter I, that even if it's a special education school, so we're going to transition. So even if it's a special education school, every IEP is still individualized. You're still not necessarily doing the same thing for every student.
Exactly.
Unless it's appropriate. And I doubt that they would be there if that would be appropriate, that they're getting the same as everyone else.
Exactly.
So tell us about your school.
Okay, my school is Winrose Academy. We are a 501c3 in Plano, Texas. We're going into our 5th year, which is really exciting. One benefit to Winrose is that in the medical model under the ABA umbrella, there is a lot of red tape when it comes to insurance and what insurance will allow and not allow and all of this. Under the school model, you don't have as much. So we can have class parties, we can have field trips, we can have parents come into the Valentine's Day party, Mother's Day tea stuff. So I feel like Winrose really brings the community and the friendship vibes, whereas in ABA therapy, you can't disclose any of that. You can't have kids and parents, and you just can't do it. And so it's really fun. I feel like it's one of the best things I've ever done.
Wow. And so how does one manage to come to your school versus other schools? And then do each of your students have individualized education programs, and how many students do you have in your building and what grade levels? So like, give me all the
Okay.
411.
We have from little guys all the way to grown-ups. So we have 2 years old, and we group them into classes based on age and ability. So it's like loosely a Montessori model when it comes to how we keep the classrooms. So loosely, we have 2-year-old, 2, 3, 4, and 5 together. But again, it's a goodness of fit. So if we have a 5-year-old that is doing things that the classroom up is doing, we'll move the 5-year-old up to the class. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have about 10 to 12 children a class. Our ratio is 1 to 4. And we also have a vocational training program called Uplifted. So as our students are becoming teenagers and adults, we have a separate, it's under the school, but it's a separate department called Uplifted, where we're teaching everything adapted, everything functional. So they may have some adapted math, some adaptive reading, but we're not going through the curriculums anymore. We're focused on vocational skills. They do lots of cooking, lots of laundry. They even do some yard keeping. They make a lot of stuff. Pre-COVID, they used to sell their items. We just haven't returned to that yet. It's very eclectic, and we take lots of different diagnoses under Winrose. It doesn't just have to be autism. So that's really cool. It feels inclusive, honestly. And then we do one fundraiser a year. It's trunk or treat. And so it's a free Halloween party, basically, that anyone in the community can come to. If you have a family member with any special need, kid or adult, you can come out, and we have food and bounce houses. We play an outdoor movie, trick-or-treating, trunk-or-treating, characters walk around. It's really, really fun.
That's awesome. That sounds amazing. So I have to ask, because, you are a BCBA, and, we've been talking about BC or ABA this whole time. So in your school, does everyone get ABA?
Not everybody, no. So a lot of the parents like this paradigm because, again, I do take young kids and older kids. And with the older they get, the more insurance will cut their hours. And so what tends to happen is around like 10 years old, they're allowed like 20, 25 hours a week by insurance. And that really makes it hard on working parents, because if they want to continue to get ABA, but they both have jobs, what do you do with your child? They could go to school part-time and then come to ABA, but then somebody has to be there to drive the child back and forth. And then you're also going in usually into a public school setting where likely everything ABA has been building for these previous years is going to get undone. And so in our Plano location, a lot of the kids will go 4 hours a day to school and then 4 hours a day to ABA, and that gives them an 8-hour day. And they get OT and speech and everything there, so the parent doesn't have to continually shuttle everywhere all the time.
Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. And so typically, and again, I say that knowing that it's all individualized, but do you have recommended amounts of time for your students at Winrose, or even students who are getting ABA as far as like a school day? I mean, 8 hours to me seems like a really long day. Mm-hmm. So is that actual times that you were saying that, like 4 hours of school and 4 hours of ABA, or is that just sort of a generalization?
For some.
Okay.
It totally depends. And so for some, they'll go 6 hours a day to school and they don't get ABA. Some kids will go 6 to 8 hours a day of only ABA. Some kids will chop it up. Some kids come part-time. Not everyone does like a full-time week of school or therapy. And so we do keep it highly individualized. But there are some kids that need 8 hours a day of ABA and some kids that flourish at 8 hours a day of school.
Okay. And so how do students get into your school since it's a 501c3, so it's a private school? So you don't accept anyone who comes and applies, I presume.
No, but yes, but it's not that complicated either. So basically we use a goodness of fit. And so there are not any like prohibitate, like, how do I say it? There's not like a financial cap or limit. There's not a certain income. There's nothing like that holds students out. Basically, they pay for tuition just like they would pay any other school. The only difference is that we are a charity. So as we get donations, those donations are applied to the financial aid portion. And so we are able to give financial aid to decrease the tuition for a lot of our families. As long as we keep getting donations, we can keep reducing the tuition. When those dry up, then tuition's got to, go back to what it's supposed to be. But our families can apply for financial aid and hardship scholarship. We have a couple different ones. So they just call our school and ask for a tour, and that's it. We'll do a trial day to make sure the child or adult is a good fit. The only real restrictions that we have at the school are, since it's a group situation and not one-on-one, we can't have any big behavior. And the person, if they're, above the age of 8, they need to be potty trained. Other than that, we're good. And then in those cases, we will usually refer to ABA. Like, why don't you go get some ABA first? Get potty trained, get the big behavior under control, and then let's do that trial day again.
Okay. I'm trying to quickly pull up. Do you have a school website?
It is Windrose Academy TX for Texas.org.
Wrong because it doesn't like what I typed. Win, as in WIN?
D.
Oh, D, wind. Okay, that's where my deficit is coming in. That's the problem. Okay, let's see if that works. See if I go somewhere. Nope, I'm still doing something wrong. Oh, I didn't spell it right because I put the D and the R in the backwards places. So while I'm looking this up, tell us about the documentary that was made.
Yeah, that was a big, big surprise. Yeah, we were contacted by PBS a little more, maybe a little more than a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago now, just saying that they were looking to do a piece on general autism education, and they wanted us to try out for it. So I did a little demo for them, and I know that other people in the area did too, and they picked us, and that really surprised me because out of most of the clinics around me, we were definitely small cookies. So I was very, very shocked that they asked us to do that. And so it's pretty cool. They've given us this short little clip that we have on our websites. And then I don't have an air date yet for the longer one, but we're all very excited about it. And it was really fun. It was really fun to celebrate our kids this way.
Yeah. So how long is this little clip? Is it something I could show?
This is about 6 minutes, I think.
I could maybe show a little bit of it, but we're kind of getting close to the end of our time. So I do have your website up here at the bottom. So if you do want to check it out, this is also on your Concept Connections page, your website, correct? I thought I saw it there too.
There's probably a link to it on there.
Okay, yeah. So if you want to check it out, I apologize. We don't really have the time to share all of it, but check it out there. And then, yeah, we've got the Windrose Academy. We've got Concept Connections here, the other website for the BCBA, ABA business. And I did not forget. I did not. What I was going to say. I read did not on here, and it says, don't forget the upcoming documentary. So is there another one happening?
No, this is the same one. So she's referring to the longer one that's going to air.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Oh, I see. So she was probably getting that together as I was pulling it up too. We were thinking along the same lines, and I'm getting confused. Yeah. So the Facebook page, I didn't pull up the Facebook page. That's what I was trying to say. And my brain got sidetracked. So we've got your Facebook page, you've got your Concept Connections website, you've got your Windrose Academy website. Is there anything else that you do that you want to talk about in the last couple minutes that we have here?
I just work a lot and I mom a lot, and that's my whole life. That's it. I mean, I'm a pretty simplistic person, very nerdy. That's it. If I get to watch Netflix every day, I'm happy, and just this is life. Keep going.
You've got some people helping you out. They're wanting to remind you about the trunk or treat, which we talked about. And the video of the documentary coming up. So I appreciate all your folks joining us today and chiming in with some of that stuff, because it is all very important to what you're doing. And it's been such a joy to get to meet you and chat with you today and to learn more. I think, ABA is a program that it had a bad rap for a while. I think that is starting to change.
I do too.
I hope so, because it can affect so much and so many areas of a person's life. And to be perfectly honest, until I was talking with you, I didn't even really know that adults could access ABA services. And so I'm really excited to hear that, that is something that you have available to your folks. And there was something else. I hate this one that happens, is there was another thought, and then I was finishing the first one and the second one got pushed out. So this parent is saying her son thrives. This is Jessica from before, that her son thrives in ABA. And Fran says, thank you for all the information today. There's just, what you're doing is incredible. And I hope that the stigma associated with ABA continues to diminish, because when it's done well, and what you said earlier about there not being enough BCBAs, it's such an arduous task to become a BCBA. I've thought about it several times, and then I look at how expensive it is and how many hours I would need of clinical time, and I think, oh my gosh, I've already spent all this time in education. I don't know that I want to put myself through all of that again. And so, kudos to all of the people that I know who are BCBAs, because to me, it's a really big accomplishment. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of school, there's a lot of clinical hours, and then there's a massive test.
Oh, yeah. Tests, which is miserable. It is miserable, that test. And it feels like one great big trial. And really, for people that are worried about ABA or dislike it, I would really encourage them to think about it this way, that ABA is a tool. It's a technology of teaching. It's a science. And it is how it is applied is different than what the tool, the technology of teaching is. Each practitioner is going to apply it a little bit differently. So make sure, really, really make sure that the BCBA who's seeing your child, that their values as a practitioner align with your values as a parent. And I think if people do that, then these horror stories will get less and less. Licensure and certification, there are websites you can report your practitioner to, and it'll be very seriously investigated. I mean, so I think it will take a community of action to kind of weed out the bad and increase the good. And so,
and just, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a million different ways to apply this science and, find a practitioner that aligns with you.
Right. And just for clarification, BCBA stands for
Board Certified Behavior Analyst.
And RBT stands for?
Registered Behavior Therapist.
So what's the difference? Is it just like the amount of clinical hours and education between those two?
And training. So a BCBA is a master's or PhD level practitioner. They can be clinical psychologists. That's where you're going through your 2,000 hours of training. You have to be mentored under a BCBA who's been a BCBA more than 5 years, for about a year and a half full time. You have to pay. In many cases, you have to pay for that, or you could be at a job that part of the perks is giving you free mentorship. It's a lot. And then you got to pass that test, which will give anyone an anxiety disorder. And then an RBT is the therapist level clinician. They only have to have a high school diploma to be able to get that training and that test. Typically, companies, though, will have their own internal standards. Like, we prefer someone to have a bachelor's degree and previous history in some type of special education realm. But yes, they have to be directly trained by the BCBA, have so many hours of classes, and then they are not allowed to practice on their own. The BCBA is designing, implementing, teaching the parents, teaching the therapist, teaching the RBT, all of that. And then the RBT is the doer. They can implement what the BCBA prescribes, but they cannot alter it.
Okay, perfect. That's an excellent explanation. I so appreciate, and we do need to wrap up, and it is time to say goodbye. So again, folks, thank you for joining today. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the reminders to Jenny about the different events that are coming up. Make sure that you're checking out her website. Make sure that you're looking up Windrose. If you're you said that's in Plano?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're in the Plano area and you have a child who has a special education need, that you are checking them out. Jenny, thank you. I'm so glad that this finally worked out. This has been amazing. And the area of behaviors has become the area that I love the most when it comes to special education. And so this conversation to me was like food for my soul, because I just love talking about it and talking with people who understand it and have a similar philosophy to mine. So thank you very much for being here. Again, thank you, everyone. And I don't know if I have a guest next week. Oh, I do have a guest next week. It will be Gabriel Cobb, the triathlete who has done, I think, like 20 something marathons. And he also happens to have Down syndrome. So yeah. So join me next week right here, Tuesday at 1:00 Central. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Keno, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Keno, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Keno is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykeno.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykeno.com, SHELLEYKENOW.